Hey everybody, welcome to another webisode of Real Life Pastor. I am John, your real life pastor, and on this episode we are going to be grilling. We're going to be grilling and we're going to be talking about where do pastors go to school. So we'll be talking about all that stuff right after this. Alrighty, so for starters, I do have this tiny, I think it's a 22-inch grill. Forgive the background, we're trying to grow some grass right now. So we're trying to keep the dogs out, and it looks a little sad out there right now. But I always prefer charcoal, just always have. But this is actually, one day we'll have dreams of a bigger one than this, but this certainly gets the job done for now. Ironically, I have some sermon notes in there from Easter service, so maybe this will be maybe there will be some theology behind this. I don't know. And I put a lot of lighter fluid on by accident, so we'll see how this goes. Alright, so while that is happening, like I said, we're going to season our meat. We also have zucchini, I believe is what Molly got. So we'll go ahead and do that right now. Alright, and she did not disappoint. We have squash, we have zucchini, peppers, and onions. So I am going to go ahead and cut this all up, and I'll show you how I'm going to season everything. Alright, so as you can see, we have quite a bit of vegetables. All we have is salt, garlic powder, black pepper. We're going to go ahead and use sesame oil just because it's a little bit lighter. And so there you have it. You might be able to see, you can kind of see the pepper a little bit. Of course, you're not going to be able to see the salt really well. And what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this in tin foil, put a little bit of butter on it, and then we'll place her on the grill first. Okay, so as you can see, we're not all the way to where we want to be yet, but there is gray on the top of the top charcoal. So I think I'm going to go ahead and dump this, just because I don't have all the time in the world. I do have somewhere to be this evening. So we're going to go ahead and dump this. Of course, you're going to want to be awfully careful. And that is hot. Okay, so now is as good a time as any to go ahead and discuss our topic for this week, or this webisode, which is, where does a pastor go to school? Now, there are several nuances on where a pastor might go to school, especially considering all the different denominations there are of churches out there, and each denomination is going to expect something different education-wise from their pastors. But in most cases, you're going to go to a place that's called seminary. Now, in seminary is where you would get your master's degree. Typically, you're going to need a bachelor's degree beforehand. So before you can even enter into seminary, most seminaries are going to require that you have a bachelor's degree in something, anything, all things, before you could be admitted. The one exception to that is a newer rule that the accreditation agency has put into place, and that is up to 15% of your students in each sort of area of study does not need to have a bachelor's degree. Now, the reason for that is actually quite simple and sad in many ways. As the church is sort of dwindling, or the church that we're used to at least is dwindling away, we're seeing less full-time jobs for pastors by a lot. Again, last week I talked about 30 to 40% of pastors have to have a separate job just to sustain their life. So, with that being said, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for most pastors to go through all that schooling, your bachelor's degree and your master's degree, just to end up with a part-time job. It doesn't make sense. It's not sustainable for the future. So seminaries are constantly trying to refine ways to sort of encourage participation and enrollment, as the church sort of, as we know it, is sort of making a transition. A lot of people would call it a decline. I think we're in a great time of transition, frankly. But as we're in this transition period, what you're seeing is not a lot of young pastors joining seminary, because it's incredibly difficult work, and on top of that, again, to get yourself in $100,000 worth of debt in schooling just for a part-time job, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense anymore. It's not sustainable, and that's why there are almost no young pastors like there used to be. In fact, I have been at my seminary, Lexington Theological Seminary, for 6 years now. 6 years, which is a long time, and it's starting to become the new norm, at least. In the 6 years, I think I've been the youngest student, except for one student who was only there for a little bit, and I'm 29 years old. So that's really telling you something about the landscape we're talking about when it comes to who is becoming pastors and how they are getting to where they need to be. Now, the master's program is typically a 2 to 4 year program. However, with a lot of seminaries, including my own, going to online platforms, our seminary, LTS, is completely online, but other seminaries still have traditional learning styles as well as online platforms. Once you make that switch to online, things slow down dramatically. Once you sort of are able to take classes at your own pace, that means there is no graduation date. It's open-ended. Who knows when you're going to graduate? That's the unfortunate truth of how things are going right now. Just because if you are taking online platform, that generally means that you're too busy for the traditional learning experience. You have jobs, you may already be a pastor like myself. I'm a pastor, and I have not graduated with my master's in divinity yet. And that's, again, something that's going to be becoming more commonplace as time goes on. And so since you are so busy, the amount of time that you can take to take classes dramatically decreases. We also have a huge influx of second career pastors, which is basically pastors who have lived a career somewhere else, some other field, have retired, and now they want to settle into ministry. So the seminary is having to rethink a lot of ways how to handle those folks as well. Do they really need a whole lot of seminary experience when they have so much life experience? Some seminaries are starting to think maybe not. And there's the alternate, which is sort of a lay school, which is traditionally for lay leaders in church. Maybe your deacons might need this. Your associate ministers might need this. If you have a pastor of pastoral care or something like that, they would go to a lay school, which is, I don't want to say it's watered down, because it's still thorough education, but it is much shorter, less classwork. And a lot of places are now starting to think that maybe this is where we ought to start going, is requiring pastors to instead have lay school instead of masters, because it's just becoming to be too much for what it's worth. And that's actually where I am right now. My denomination and my region in my denomination of the United Church of Christ has adopted what we're calling alternative path to ordination, and it's geared towards people like me, but mostly towards second career pastors, no longer requiring that a pastor, in order to become ordained, we'll talk about ordination in another video, no longer requiring a master's in order to become ordained, but instead requiring some sort of lay school so you get some sort of theological, biblical base under you. So you're not just out there in the churches spewing whatever crazy belief system that you have, that you certainly have an educational background. It's just not going to be as thorough as the masters. Now, when we're talking about master programs, we're talking again about Master in Divinity, which is the primary one that most church denominations are requiring their pastors to have. Masters in divinity. There's other things like masters in ministry, masters in theology, and all sorts of different sort of paths you can take. Again, each of these are different according to which seminary you are going to. So just to answer that question in the most basic sense, where does a pastor go to school? Most of the time it's going to be seminary of some sort. However, that is no longer the absolute must that it once was, as the church is making a transition and you're seeing more second career pastors, more working pastors like myself who just don't have the time and the finances anymore to dedicate that much for a part-time job. I know it sounds crass because, you're not supposed to go into ministry for money, and that is absolutely true. Don't go into ministry for money. I think I've said that before in a previous video. But at the same time, you're trying to support a family. I have a family that I'm trying to support here, and I can't do that if I am going back and forth between 2 or 3 or 4 jobs. It's really hard. And also paying off $100,000 in student debt for all of that. It just doesn't make sense anymore. So we're really seeing this transition right now, which I think is healthy, I think is necessary, and a good way to sort of move the church into the next 25, 50, 100 years of what the church is really going to start to look like. So yeah, that's all I have on this specific topic. We'll get back to grilling here in just a moment. Okay, so the next thing we have is our chicken breast. We buy free range. Alright, so there you have it, easy peasy. You're basically going to grill each side of the chicken breast for 5 to 7 minutes. The vegetables are fine to stay in there. I just hope that they don't fall over the chicken. So we'll see how this goes. Again, way too many vegetables. But it is what it is. See you in 5 to 7 minutes. Constantly having to scoot these vegetables back. Oh, yes. Beautiful. All right, another 5 to 7 minutes and we will be done. I want to thank everybody for tuning in this week for Real Life Pastor with me, John. It was a fun time. This chicken looks so good. The vegetables look good too, I guess. If you like the content, go ahead and like and subscribe for this channel so you can get all the up-to-date videos on what it's like to be a real life pastor. We'll see you all next week. Bye, everybody.